Hello, welcome everybody. As you can see in the chat, we invite you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your company, its mission statement, and we appreciate you all taking time to join us today. My name is Andy Fife from B Lab, US Canada. I'm joined here by some colleagues from here at B Lab and then some friends who've been supporters of our work, including Alex, one of the co-founders of East Fork Pottery. With that said, let me show the screen for some visuals behind our conversation today. Wonderful. Okay, so we hope to have a conversation today for about 30-35 minutes on the legal requirement for certification. So the purpose of today's time together is to discuss just that, but specifically for companies that are LLCs and what that process looks like for amending your operating agreement. So most of you are all actively pursuing B Corp certification, and we want to make sure that process and reasoning for this important element of the certification is more easily understood, and hoping to get all your questions answered, either through myself of the reasoning why this legal requirement exists, and then very special to have Bill Clark with us and Alex from East Fork to speak directly on their experience of doing this for their company. So with that said, I'd like to pass over to Bill first to introduce himself, and then Alex, if you could each take a minute to tell us a little bit about who you are and why this is important to you. So I'll pass over to Bill first.
Thank you, Andy. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Bill Clark. I'm senior counsel with the law firm of Faegre, Drinker, Biddle, and Reith. It's a large international law firm. I happen to work out of the Philadelphia office of the firm. And most importantly, in terms of today's presentation, I've had the opportunity and true pleasure of working with B Lab for over 10 years on the legal requirement for certified B Corps, as well as the development of the benefit corporation form, and now also the benefit limited liability company. So it's great to have you here, and I will be back shortly in a later section of the program to talk to you about some of the technicalities involved.
Hey everybody, my name's Alex Matisse. I'm the founder of East Fork Pottery. And yeah, I'm going to talk to you a little bit just from our perspective, what it was like amending our operating agreement, which was relatively painless. Spoiler alert. Yeah, happy to be here. East Fork, primarily we're a manufacturing company sort of wrapped in the skin of a direct-to-consumer brand. So we sell primarily 95% of what we make through our website. We have sort of gone through the Industrial Revolution in a period of about 4 years. I started the company on a little farm in Madison County, North Carolina, just outside of Asheville, making pottery on a potter's wheel. And now we've got about 125 employees and two factories here in Asheville, and are planning for our forever home in 2025. So yeah, that's me in East Fork.
All right, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Alex, for joining us today. So quickly, just as a backdrop, is that a few folks here and I represent B Lab. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we are the nonprofit behind the B Corp certification that many of you are either actively pursuing or you are already a B Corp yourself. And our mission as an organization is to build a more inclusive and regenerative economic system for all people and the planet. And one of those levers of change is to continue to grow a community of companies that are using business as a force for good, and thus earning B Corp certification to signal that to your customers, to your future employees, to your partners, to your communities of really what responsible business could look like. So in about 15 years of work, there are now 4,000 certified B Corps operating around the world across 153 industries. I think what's important to note here is that the majority of these certified B Corps are small businesses actively growing but looking for some of these frameworks to help support the foundation of their business and really bake that mission into the company from the start. And so, as you all know, that there are 3 pillars of certification. One is that every company meets a performance requirement, which is basically going through the assessment. I would imagine most of you all have gone through that or are still working through that. We are here to support if you have any questions. And then the other requirement is meeting the utmost transparency around those different impact scores. So we invite you to take a look at the B Corp directory on our website. You can search East Fork Pottery or any of your other favorite B Corps and see how these different companies score in those different areas. Now, what we are speaking about today is the 3rd requirement, which is around legal accountability. So every certified B Corp around the world, to the extent possible, meets a legal framework, basically ensuring that the company is committed and accountable and allowed to consider the interests of all of their stakeholders, so all the different groups that they impact through their business operations, and not just their shareholders. And so this is really broadening out that aperture of focusing on one bottom line, which many call shareholder primacy. And so revisiting the process of certifying, you all are in the right place to take the time to really understand that legal requirement and pathway. One of my colleagues will put in a link in the chat on how to determine that for your company. And then you start to work the assessment. And so I think many of you all have submitted that assessment and you are now looking at a task to upload and complete this legal amendment, which we will talk through shortly. Now, another reason why we want to host this webinar, and it took us way too long to come up with this idea to do so, is recognizing that there are a lot of companies that make it towards that final step in the certification process and do not end up certifying, roughly around 60%. And so you can see some of the reasons that some of my colleagues like Lindsay and Carrie Ann have really identified after extensive conversations with these companies. But one of them in particular is that either documentation is not prepared or the legal requirement is either not understood or not fulfilled. And so we wanted to at least demystify, some of that process and offer up some of the support and resources to help you through that. Also want to make sure that we note that this is going to be recorded. So in case this is helpful to either share the slide deck or this webinar with anybody you need to have that conversation with, you will get that in follow-up to our meeting today. So why do we do this? We think this is a key pillar of B Corp certification. We believe that it's imperative, but not enough to meet the performance requirement of certification. As I shared earlier, as companies continue to grow, whether or not you are ever anticipating bringing on outside capital or looking at going public or acquisition, we feel it is important to be able to really bake this and enshrine this into your corporate DNA to support your leadership and that mission as the company continues to innovate and respond, to the evolving needs of your employees, our shared environment, and our communities. And so what you can see below is that this is a requirement for all companies with less than 50 full-time employees. And so this has to be met before the certification is complete. And as most of you know, this is also identified in our assessment. And so within mission lock, it's worth points. And so just by committing to it, you earn a fraction of those points. And then I think most importantly for most of you is that it's actually worth 10 points in our assessment. And so we quantitatively believe in this being a great best practice for companies to adopt, and especially for companies that are maybe looking for opportunities for improvement to get above the minimum score of 80. This is also a great opportunity to achieve that in order to be eligible for certification. So with that, I want to pass it over to our colleague, Bill Clark, to speak a little bit more on the process of making this amendment to your operating agreement. So Bill, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you, Andy. And we now move into a more specific discussion of the legal requirement. And in particular, what we're going to do today is start with the very first step of understanding the legal requirement and the language that you will be asked to include in your documentation. So we'll take up that subject very soon. But first of all, the second thought on this slide of identifying the correct team and making sure that you know everyone that should be involved and you're considering their perspective on these issues is very important. And this is something that you should keep in mind as you move throughout this process. We'll actually come back to this question of identifying the board or managers of the LLC and important investors and the significance of that in a few moments. But let's now actually move into a consideration of the actual legal steps that you will be going through. In the case of a limited liability company or an LLC, there are two basic documents that control its affairs. We will refer to them as the certificate and the agreement. The certificate is sometimes referred to as a certificate of formation, a certificate of organization. Some states actually refer to it as articles of formation or organization. It's a very brief document that is filed with the state in an office such as the Secretary of State, or the office in state government may have a different name. But the idea is to put of record the fact that the LLC has been organized. The certificate is publicly available, anyone can see it, and its purpose is to actually create the legal entity. But it should not be relevant for your purposes for this question of adopting the legal requirement. Instead, the focus is on the agreement, which is often referred to as your operating agreement. You may call it your limited liability company agreement. There are various names under state law, but it is a document that is not publicly filed, but tends to be fairly lengthy because its purpose is to set forth all the rules and the agreed arrangement for managing the affairs of your LLC. So you need to identify that document, make sure that you have the currently effective text of that document, and then you need to begin to review it. You should very likely find, and it's typically toward the end, a provision on how the agreement may be amended. That's going to be very important because to adopt the legal requirement in an LLC, you will be required to amend the agreement. The default rule, meaning that the presumption under state law for the vote that's required to amend the agreement, is a unanimous vote of all of the owners. I think it's fairly typical for lawyers and business people as they're setting up their individual LLC to change that rule to lower the vote. You may very well find that all you need is a majority vote in order to amend the agreement, or it may be higher than that, but less than full unanimity. But you need to understand that because that will affect how you approach getting the requisite approval from the members of your LLC so that you get at least the vote that's required in order to meet the requirements for amending the agreement itself. Then after you've identified the rules for amending the agreement, you should look for two other possible provisions that very often are found in agreements, although not always. First of all, look for a provision in your agreement that talks about the purpose of your LLC. Those are fairly common, and you may find one, although if you don't, we'll talk about what to do in that circumstance in just a moment. And in addition, you should look for a provision in your agreement that talks about the duties and responsibilities of the people who are managing the business. The common pattern is to place the purpose provision fairly near the beginning of the agreement. Very often you'll see it as part of an Article 1 or an Article 2 of your agreement. The provisions on the duties and responsibilities of the people in charge of the business tends to appear typically in the middle of the agreement. So you'll need to, in effect, take a pretty good look at your entire agreement Since the amendment provisions are at the end and the purpose is at the beginning and the duties are in the middle, hopefully you'll know where to go in your particular agreement and find the correct sections. Now, let's talk about the specifics of the requirements that B Lab asks you to satisfy, and Andy will go to the next slide. There are two particular provisions that B Lab is looking for and requires you to adopt. First of all, is a very important revision of the purpose for which your LLC exists. And you'll see on the left side of this slide, the actual language that you're asked to adopt. And it provides that the purpose of your company will include creating a material positive impact on society and the environment taken as a whole from the business and operations of the company. If you find a purpose provision in your LLC agreement, you should assume that your existing purpose will not change, but rather this purpose will be added. And so you'll see that the language itself actually says that the purpose, including whatever you have chosen for your LLC, will also include, so this is an additional layer on top of whatever your specific purpose or mission or the goal that you're seeking to accomplish through your business is. And this purpose, and the purpose of this purpose statement is to affirm and make clear that as you run your business, you're seeking to have a material positive impact on society and the environment generally. So if you think about it, this is really intended to make clear that as a certified B Corp, you are a true triple bottom line business. You are for profit. You're intended to be financially successful, but you're also seeking a material positive impact on society and the environment. Okay, that's the revision of the purpose. Now let's go to the next slide, Andy. Because if you think about it, now that you've agreed to this new purpose, how are you going to ensure that you accomplish that purpose? How are you going to instruct the people in charge of your business as to what their responsibilities are to accomplish this new purpose? And you'll see in the language on the left, the requirement for what you need to add with respect to the responsibilities and duties of the people in charge of the business. It begins very importantly with subsection A, which may be a little bit hard for you to see on your screen, but it's essentially a statement that as the people who are running your business consider what's in its best interest and how to manage the business, they will consider all of your stakeholders. Andy already mentioned the concept of stakeholder governance. This is a clear statement of what that means and what the people running the business are required to do. Now, I say the people running the business because LLC law permits an LLC to be organized in one of two ways. And now we're looking at the right side of this slide. LLCs are managed either by the members, and the members are the people who actually own the LLC and have an economic interest in it, or an LLC is managed by managers. Managers is the term that's used in LLC law generally to refer to a group of people who is different than the entire body of all of the members. So you may have a LLC that's set up so that only some of the members have management responsibilities. In that case, those members are what are called member managers. Or you may have an LLC where the managers actually may not be members and not have an economic interest in the company, and they are called simply managers. You may also find that if you have managers, they may be referred to as board members. Some LLCs actually even refer to them as directors, although the more common approach is to not use the term director, but you may very well see a board of managers referred to in your agreement. After you've identified the section of your agreement that goes into the specifics of how it is to be managed, you should look for a provision that talks specifically about what the duties of the people who are managing your LLC are intended to be. So it might be that you have a provision dealing with the duties of members who are managing the LLC, or you may have a provision dealing with the duties of the managers. Or you may find that there is no provision at all that talks specifically about duties. That is not uncommon. If you find that you don't have anything in your agreement about duties, what that means simply is that the duties of the managers or the managing members are what is set forth in statute as the rule that applies unless you change it. If that's the case in your agreement and there's no reference to duties, then you will simply need to create a new section of the operating agreement, which you would probably put with these other provisions about management, just so that they're easy to find. Now let's go back to the left side for just one more minute. And in particular, this language, we've talked about subsection A. There are several other components of the change in responsibilities. In subsection B, its purpose is to make clear that the interests that are listed in A and the various stakeholder interests that are to be considered are not intended to have any kind of hierarchy. Instead, if you look at B, it says that in discharging their duties, the managers or managing members are not required to regard any of the interests listed in A as having a dominant or controlling interest. What that means is that the job of the managers is to consider each issue that comes before them in a manner that looks at the interests of all of the stakeholders listed in A, but does not necessarily prioritize those interests in any particular way. So, for example, if you think about it, if you're considering a change in the benefits or the salary to be paid to employees, obviously they will be an important consideration, but you will think less about the environmental impact, for example, of changing the benefits available to your employees. On the other hand, if you're thinking of building a new plant or buying new equipment for a manufacturing process, obviously that will impact more the environmental aspect of your triple bottom line commitment as opposed to the focus on society, the interest of your workers. And of course, I hope this is never the case for your company, but if you are having financial problems, then the expectation is that the managers will pay particular attention to solving the financial problems. So as a result, there's no required or weight that's always assigned to any of these interests. It varies in the judgment of the managers. Then subsection C is intended to protect the managers and makes clear, if you just look at the first line, that a manager or a managing member does not have a duty to a person other than a member. What that is intended to mean is that there's no duty owed to any of the stakeholders listed in A other than the members, in the sense that none of those other stakeholders is being given the right to bring a lawsuit to challenge a decision by the managers. Instead, enforcement of the duties in this requirement all lies with the members. And then D and E are further elaborations on how all of this is intended to work and are recommended for your adoption as well. All right, Andy, let's go to the next slide, because we've now looked at what the language is that you'll be asked to adopt. We've reviewed your operating agreement. We've thought about where to place the amendment. Now it's important to think about the mechanics of doing all of this. we've already talked about identifying what vote will be required from your members to approve the amendment. If you have a board, it's likely that the board will need to approve the amendment first and then recommend it to your members. And it's at this point in particular that, although I wanted you to be paying attention to the reaction of your investors throughout all this process as you're thinking about it, dealing with your members directly and explaining to them, and in particular to any outside investors you may have in your company, why you want to make this change and what its implications are, will be very important, because obviously you will need to secure the approval of the minimum number required to amend your particular agreement. So investor relations, dealing with your members, getting approval of both of the groups that need to approve will be necessary in order to move forward with the amendment. So you need to focus on your board, particularly as you're moving forward with the actual process of approving the amendment. And you need to focus very clearly on your investors and members. Consult with them, be very open with them, explain the importance of this change, explain to them the value of being a certified B Corp and the certification that you're seeking to acquire, and make sure that they understand the nature of the business that they've already decided to invest in, and that they understand that fulfilling your mission is critical to your success, even your financial success. So as you've gone through that process, you now come to the actual task of doing the paperwork. And at this point, I need to point out that you have a choice that you face. There are 5 states, which are listed on this slide, that have authorized benefit LLCs. That's very similar to a benefit corporation, but you'll see Delaware, Maryland, Oregon. I think I saw one of the participants actually indicate that their business is located in Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Utah. In those 5 states, instead of adopting the legal language that we just went through, you have the choice of simply becoming a benefit LLC under those states. And if you were to do that, by virtue of simply becoming a benefit LLC, you would become subject to the new purpose and duty requirements. You would still need to get approval for amending your operating agreement, but in that case, the amendment would only need to say that your company is a benefit LLC under the state law of the state that you're operating in. And it's important to note at this point that the amendment actually to become a benefit LLC may not be to your agreement, but rather to your certificate. So although we haven't really talked about the certificate since the start of this section of the discussion, it comes back now if you decide to elect to go with the benefit LLC form. But you don't have to. Even if you are in a state where there are benefit LLCs, you can continue on the process of just adopting the amendment as we've discussed it and putting it into your operating agreement. So at that point, we hope that you will follow through, that you will meet a positive and excited response from your board and investors, and get the necessary approval, make the change. And then at that point, I turn the program, Andy, back to you. And I think maybe you want to introduce Alex and we'll move forward.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Bill, for your insights and expertise. With that, we're very honored and privileged to have Alex joining us from the beautiful Pottery of East Fork here in Asheville, North Carolina, to speak a little bit more on the experience of going through it as a company. One thing we've learned is that that's probably the most impactful, in addition to Bill's expertise, is also hearing about the experience of a fellow B Corp. So Alex, with that, I will pass it off to you to speak on that for our guests today.
Thanks, Andy, for that introduction. And Bill, that was great to hear that from the perspective of a legal professional. Thanks so much for walking us through that. I'm going to give you this from the perspective of a decidedly not legal professional. And I was sort of prompted with a few questions, so I'll refer back to them here briefly. But the first one is just what does the process look like for what did the process look like for us going through it? And we had at the point in time that we were trying to amend our operating agreement, we had raised some money, but we had done it through individuals. So we didn't have any institutional capital at that time. I'm going to try to sort of sprinkle in, bits of advice. The first one is, the earlier that you can do this in the life cycle of your organization, I think the better. And certainly if you can do this prior to bringing in that institutional capital, it's probably also better, although plenty of companies have done it probably after, I don't know, Allbirds just IPO'd. I don't know when they went through their certification process, but for us, the less kind of cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, I think the easier it is going to be to get everybody on board. But the process was exactly as Bill described it. We worked with our legal team and our investors at the time and went back and forth. And for the most part, I would say that our lawyers were probably the most difficult to convince that this was good. And maybe that means we need to find a law firm that's a B Corp. But they had some experience with this, but not a tremendous amount of experience. And so from there, I actually went through, right before this meeting, went through some old emails that we were exchanging. And I just thought it'd be funny. So I have these notes from our lawyer that we were working with at the time. And these were his main concerns, which I just think will be interesting to bring up because your legal counsel may bring up something similar. Big surprise that it will increase the duties of the managers and thus their potential liability. They were really, the main thing was concerned about the liabilities increasing for the managers and the board. The managers would have a duty going forward enforceable by the members to take into account the factors listed in Clause A, some of which he thought were vague. Normally, managers have well-defined and limited duties that generally run to the members and have been worked out in court cases over many years. So really his concern and the concerns that they sort of constantly bring up are just, if you're trying to do something new and it sort of hasn't been proven, it makes sort of someone that comes from a more traditional background, it just makes their antenna perk up. This was point number 2. On the other side, from an investor's perspective, the language means that these factors may be taken into account even to the detriment of the interests of the members. Financial investors often prefer that their financial interests be required to be protected. And then further to that, because of the prior point, I'd be concerned that some institutional investors would not be willing to invest in the company with the clause in the operating agreement. We were not really worried about any of these because so much of what we had been doing as East Fork from the very beginning was in line with everything that we were asked to quantify through the B Corp process. So we were not really concerned from the perspective, the liability perspective, and our investors really weren't either. So we had to, basically just tell the lawyers that this is what we wanted to do and this is what we were going to do, and that's what we did. And then from the perspective of making it difficult to raise capital, this has become less and less of an issue, I think. So many, if you have a company that someone wants to invest in, it's kind of a seller's market right now, in a lot of ways, I think. And people are just getting much more comfortable, and really to have that certification and be part of this family it's a selling point to an investor, especially an investor that you would want to invest. We didn't want to bring anybody in that would turn their nose up at this. That really has been, we just raised our first round of quote unquote institutional capital. And the folks that we raised from had invested in B Corps before, and none of this came up in any of the conversations that we had going back and forth with the operating agreement. None of the changes that we made were even mentioned in any of those conversations. So that let's see, going back to the questions here, Andy, how am I on time? Is there anything that you want to toss in, any questions for me?
Alex, I think you're good. Maybe if you could go back in time, maybe anything that you wish you would have known, or any advice. I think what you're giving up is good experience for other folks to be cautious of, or maybe reaffirm questions that they're getting to, but maybe any advice looking back.
Yeah, I think doing it early, the earlier you can do it, the better, is really the only advice. There was a question around cost and how much this costs, and I unfortunately can't go back and sort of slice out how much this costs, but it's going to depend really on the complexity of the organization and how many investors and how much back and forth you're going to have to do with your lawyers there. But I don't think we would have done anything different, aside from maybe if you're vetting your legal counsel, to maybe find, and I know that there are plenty of law firms that are B Corp certified, but to find one that you're speaking the same language to would be maybe something that I would have done differently. At this point in time, we're probably, well, maybe we'd switch law firms. I don't know. Send me an email if you're on here. But yeah, I think speaking the same language is important, and would have maybe made that process go a little bit smoother and maybe a little bit faster, and incurred less cost on our end.
Great. Well, Alex, thank you so much for sharing about your experience. I think with that, we will pass it off and open it up for any questions that anybody has. We have about 5 more minutes, and you'll see a few links here, a few that are highlighted for the ones that I think are probably most relevant to the conversation today. Obviously, you cannot click through them as a slide, but you will receive this slide deck follow-up today after this event. So with that, I will open it up for any questions, and maybe if my colleagues Lindsay and Zach want to help curate a question or two before we hop off, either for Alex, Bill, or myself.
I'm sorry, Andy, when you said curate, I'm wondering whether you want one of your colleagues to pose particular questions, or whether you would simply like us to answer what has not yet been answered.
That is a great question. I'm going to hop into the Q&A and see if there is a question, but Bill, if you or Alex see one that you think would be helpful to answer, I invite you to go for it.
Well, there are 3 that have not been answered yet. So the first one asked for an example or sample language of an actual board resolution. That will read something along the lines of the operating agreement of the company is amended by adding the following language, or alternatively, an existing section is amended to read in full as set forth below, and then it would be the existing language plus the additional language. I'm not sure what more we can say about that. There's no magical language that you need to ask for. The next question asks, once the legal paperwork is completed, how long does the process take, and is there a cost involved for certification? That's probably one, Andy, for you or one of your colleagues from B Lab.
Yep, happy to share. And so the process of doing it can really take as quickly as you can convene your lawyers for any support. And then, as we stated earlier, for companies that are less than 50 full-time employees, we just require that you upload that once you submit your assessment before you go into the next stages of what we call evaluation and verification. For the fees for certification, if I understood the question correctly, you can take a look at our website, bcorporation.net. And when you go to the tab of B Corp certification, you'll be able to see the fee structure, which is tiered by company net sales of your previous fiscal year. I think also worth noting that we offer an equity discount for marginalized populations, given the ownership of the company, and that's up to 40% off for your certification fee for the first 3 years of your certification term. All right, I think we have time for one more question. Bill, if you want to pick one from one that you're seeing.
Well, so there's a question: if you are a single member, single proprietor LLC, is it still recommended to use legal counsel if you adopt the B-Lab templates? It always helps to have a lawyer, although I suspect that the real question here is cost. And whoever put together your existing agreement may be able to help you. And honestly, if your agreement looks like what I'm used to seeing, it may be fairly easy for you to do it actually without the benefit of clergy, because you will probably find the correct purpose language and the correct, actually, you're less likely to find a section on duties in a single member LLC, in which case you might want to get some assistance, although choice of lawyer is extremely important. I couldn't agree more with everything that Alex just said. It's a sad commentary that most of the pushback in this area actually comes from legal counsel, sadly. But then again, there are more and more law firms that are becoming B Corps, and more lawyers that are happy to help for reduced fees or other alternative billing arrangements. So maybe I also suggest you look around for legal counsel. Let's see, question: one of our subsidiaries under the parent company is located in Oregon, but incorporated in Delaware. The parent company is incorporated in Oregon. Does the benefit LLC status apply? That's an interesting situation. Actually, both Oregon and Delaware have benefit LLCs. So you face a lot of options in terms of whether you're going to elect benefit LLC status or simply do the amendment. And without knowing more about your situation, I don't want to tell you which to choose, but you certainly have all of those options available.
And Bill, I'll jump in there. For that company, from that question, if you're still here in the webinar, you can reach out to us at certify@bcorporation.net. Because one of the questions there is just thinking through, where does the legal requirement need to happen as it relates to certification? And so the basic gist there is that we enforce the legal requirement at the entity that has control over the majority of the operations as it relates to maybe supply chain, to employee well-being, decision-making, really to ensure sovereignty and autonomy of the entity that is fulfilling the legal. And so potentially, B-Lab could ask that the legal requirement happen at the top, at the parent level, depending on the structure and relationship of that subsidiary. So again, for any questions, you can always reach out to us at certify@bcorporation.net. And with that, I think I will wrap us up to try to achieve a webinar within and below 60 minutes. So thank you so much, Bill Clark and Alex Matisse, for joining us from East Fork Pottery. And for all of you for taking the time to learn about this, understanding that this is a very unique but integral part of B Corp certification. So thank you all for using business as a force for good, and we hope to hear from you. All right, hope you have a good rest of your day and take care.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks.